Here we go. Okay.
Great, thank you, Andy. All right, thanks. And looks like we got the logo on there too. So I'm just going to take a few minutes here to introduce why we're here and what this is all about. Actually, go back to the photograph though.
Oh
I
gosh.
wanted to start with that if you can.
Okay, there we go.
Ah, the little arrow. And I've been, some of you were probably on the previous kickoff event we had a couple of weeks ago. And I'm trying to change up these pictures, but I want to start out with just a visualization of what it is we're really trying to get at here, which is watershed planning for the Rio de Flag. So having this combination of the channel and the peaks, I'm hoping will help us focus on the bigger picture, that includes the channel that goes through town and through our neighborhoods, and that we're so, maybe more aware of. But this is all tied to this larger watershed up on the peaks. And I like this picture in particular because it gets a little bit at that quirky thing that the Rio de Flag does of seeming like it's going to flow off into the Verde, but actually wrapping around and heading north and going into the little Colorado River. So this is out in the Donny Park area, Picture Canyon area, looking back up at the peaks. So yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so what is this all about? And what we're here tonight to really get your input on and provide information and presentation about is the Watershed Alliance for the Rio de Flag and a watershed plan for the Rio de Flag. And the Friends of the Rio de Flag first kind of envisioned this idea of doing a watershed plan and applied to and were successful with getting a grant from the Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart Grant Program. And that really has the goal of bringing together stakeholders and the communities of a watershed to sort of wrestle with the long-term issues and also opportunities that might be inherent in the watershed going forward, so that we can sort of proactively and through a broad group of stakeholders address issues and come up with ideas and move forward to actually implement a plan. So the two components of that Water Smart grant were to create a diverse, expanded watershed stakeholder group. And we, the Friends of the Rio de Flag and myself as the watershed group coordinator, we've been working with a sort of core team of the city of Flagstaff and the county and others to create this larger stakeholder group. And that has expanded to be a number of different stakeholders, including Hopi Tribe and a whole array of agencies and organizations and individuals. And through our meetings, we've come up with this new name of the Watershed Alliance for the Rio de Flag, or the WARF. And so that's one component of the grant. The other is to develop this ongoing, living, community-based watershed plan so that we can collaborate as the WARF in undertaking priority projects that we've all identified together. We can evaluate the success of those plans, of those projects, and adapt the plan going forward. So this isn't meant to be a plan that sits on the shelf. It's co-developed, community-based, and will have metrics and evaluations and a plan for adapting as we go forward so that it stays live. Next slide, please.
Keep wanting my spacebar to work and it's just not gonna.
So why have we gathered all of you here, and then how can you be involved, and why is that important? So we've got 6 of these Zoom meetings. We've had the first one, this is the second one. And each of those feature this interactive map that Andy will talk about, with surveys and questions for your input. And that interactive map will be available to you during the meeting and also afterwards. We'll keep it live on the website. We've created, you can see down below, you can also visit the Watershed Alliance for the Rio.net, the new website we've put together for the WRF, that will have more ways to get involved over time. And for now, it will have those, the list of the speaker series and the various maps that are part of the surveys going forward. And why is this community based? Why do we so want everyone's input? And it's because when you're working at this watershed scale, that work is inherently complex, and we're wanting it to be not only geographically, but socially and ecologically comprehensive and forward looking. So that really happens when we have a lot of diverse viewpoints and expertise, and this amazing Flagstaff community involved. The next one, the last one. So what is this going to do for our watershed? So this is a kind of a broad statement of what we're aiming for, and we're seeking to bring together conservation, awareness building, and restoration activities. And this particular Zoom is really directed at that awareness building throughout the Rio de Flag watershed, and to have this be a coordinated and collaborative and inclusive community effort. So that's one of the things that Friends of the Rio identified, was the need for collaboration and coordination amongst all these different projects that are going on in the watershed, to have them all pulled together. And this guided by science and the multicultural perspectives, because we have so many Indigenous communities that are tied to the watershed, as well as the whole diversity of communities that are in Flagstaff itself. So that's pretty much a little introduction to it, and I'll hand off to Andy to introduce the speakers.
Great. So my name is Andy Rogers. I work for Southwest Decision Resources. We're a local facilitation mediation group in town. I'm here with my colleague, Lisa Clark, who will wave at you. It's kind of hard when we're screen sharing, but you'll see her face in a little bit. And we are happy to be part of this program. We work closely on a variety of other projects throughout the state into New Mexico, trying to really foster collaborative dialogue and more long-lasting decisions and solutions through robust public dialogue. So thank you all for coming. Now to the really fun stuff. Quick Zoom tips for tonight's discussion. So many of you have used Zoom, but we always take just a couple minutes to orient you to this. So in Zoom, there's a mute and unmute button. We'd like you to keep your buttons on mute when you're not speaking, just so we can keep the noise clutter down a little bit. Obviously, if you need to speak, try to remind to take yourself off mute. We'd encourage you to keep your camera on if you have the ability to do so. The chat box, you can see the little icon there. We invite you to use the chat box throughout the evening to ask questions of speakers, to let us know if you're having any issues. Please use that chat box, and Lisa will be monitoring that. We'll also be saving that as part of the notes and transcripts from the evening. There's a list of your participants. You can find out who is here in just a different way instead of trying to read it above the multiple pages of people on this meeting. You can find it all in one column there, and there's a place for you to raise your hand as well. We don't shy away from just physically raising your hand either, so either form works for us this evening. You can choose, when we're not sharing screen, to choose the gallery view. That's really nice because you can see everyone that's on the call. And again, when there's this many people, you need to go page by page to see everyone. And then now I have to move your faces. We'd encourage you to have the same meeting etiquette that you do when you're with people. So please give us respectful behavior and stay engaged in our short 1.5 hour meeting. I feel like a airline flight attendant all of a sudden. No seatbelts necessary though. All right, here we go. Let me move your faces again. All right, so tonight's session, let's get on down to the Rio, is talking about community awareness, celebration, and engagement. And so I'm happy to report to you that we have 3 wonderful speakers this evening, and I'd ask you to wave when I introduce you. We've got Art Babbitt with us, we've got Moan Hen, and we've got Maggie Toomey. So we'll have representation from your City of Flagstaff, from Willow Bend, and also Coconino County Board of Supervisors, Art. So we'll have some panel presentations. We encourage you to ask questions of the speakers, understanding that they won't be able to address those until they're done speaking, but please ask those questions along the way. We're gonna have few little engagements, things to do this evening. So we'll take a short break, but we're gonna be doing some fun Zoom polls and this platform called Mentimeter here in a minute. And then so after your break, we'll have a group discussion. We have a couple of questions to prompt just some open dialogue for about 20 minutes. And then the last 15 minutes, we'll be doing what Kelly talked about, which is we have this really cool survey tool that I'll walk you through that will be open tonight, open at midnight if you have another idea, open next week if you have another idea, that really focuses on place-based thoughts. So we're gonna be queuing you up on ways to engage your community about the Rio. And then we'll be out of here by 7. We do like to keep it open for 15, 20, 30 minutes longer. If people wanna hang out and talk, most of the time people take us up on this. So if you'd like to have some less structured conversation, please do so. Okay, let me see. Wait, before we get going, I need to stop sharing. We want to first, by way of hands, there are a lot of people on here that I know were at the last session. So I think what might be easier is raise your hand if you were not in the first speaker series. Keep them up. 2, 3, 4, 5. Next page. No cameras. Bummer. All right, so we've got a handful of new folks. We do want to ask the same question of you all, though, which is, I'm going to paste a little, I'm going to paste something in the chat box here in a minute. And we want to find out from you which neighborhood you're from. So if you could please just go to this link in the chat box and write in trying to find. Hold on, I think I'm still screen sharing. Trying to, let's see here. Why am I not able to pull up? Having some technical difficulties. I'm going to get back to this during the break. I'm going to find that stinking Mentimeter and show you which neighborhoods you're from. But right now, it's not showing up on my shared screen. So thank you for that. And I see people writing it in the chat box. Were you able to write that in there? Great. I will find that and share that later with you all. But without further ado, let's go back to the presentation. And Art Babbitt, you are up first. Let me know when you would like me to switch slides for you, sir.
Great. Well, that sounds good. You can just kind of go right to the first one.
Okay.
And we have 10 minutes, so I'm going to start with my comments and hopefully weave a thread together, and you can go to the next slide, that talks about the relationship between our watersheds, the health of our watersheds, and something that I have been very engaged in for the last 15 years in office as a former co-chair of the Forest Restoration Initiative, which is the 2.4 million acre landscape scale restoration effort that has gone on for getting close to a decade now, and the relationship between those restoration efforts and our health of our watersheds in terms of how those connect. They are not tangentially related in the Southwest, in the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world. They are integrally related, and you cannot separate the health of our watersheds from the health of our forests. So I've also served as the chair of the Coconino Plateau Water Advisory council when it had that name primarily, was on the Water Commission. And so I've been in elected office for many years and finishing up this month, and I'm very excited about finishing up. And so, in that role I've played, it has been really, really, really clear to me. There's this incredible desire and this passion around watershed protection, watershed management, forest health. Where the rubber meets the road from the seat that I sit in is what are the authorities and legal bandwidths for us to affect the health of the watersheds, and where do we have to focus our efforts from a legislative and political leadership role in changing that. Next slide, please. And so as a result, while she's pulling that up, I just finished testifying before a Senate subcommittee on biomass. I've been very engaged on Forest Service reform in terms of some of the rules around forest management and the timber industry. And so one of the pieces that flows right out of that role is the understanding that I have to have in my job is to figure out what is the legal foundation, the legal guardrails that allow us to impact positively our watersheds, because we have many guardrails which allow us to impact negatively our watersheds. We need to talk about what is the next set of conversations. Since the last major legislative initiative on water in the state of Arizona was the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. In the last 40 years, between climate change, 20 plus years of drought, growth and development, those tools do not work anymore. And we think we are going to kind of kid ourselves if we think the same thing that got us by in 1980 is going to get us by in 2020 with drought and climate change. There is a little piece of good news, and this is something the Alliance, I think, will be well served by really paying close attention to. I'm happy to facilitate, is there is finally some movement in the Arizona legislature to bring a rural water management bill forward. It got introduced last year. I was the only county supervisor to support that bill. Representative Blackman was a co-sponsor of it, and it is a way for us to start opening the window to allow local watershed, groundwater, and sub-basin management of our water resources outside of those major active management areas, which are Phoenix and Tucson and a little bit in Prescott. Right now, it's have at it. There's no regulatory oversight of well drilling outside of those AMAs. There is no county or oversight. When someone wants to drill a well, they are allowed to drill a well. What we are saying is local jurisdictions need to be able to comment and bring perspectives to the management of those watersheds. The political reality of why this has changed is really interesting. This was long a place where only places like Coconino County wanted to go. Substantively has changed when large foreign-owned agricultural endeavors have come into the state of Arizona in very, very, very conservative counties, and they all of a sudden are realizing what unmanaged, unregulated groundwater pumping is going to do to their communities. And so without that shift, and those places like Mojave County, La Paz County getting on board, this never would have happened. It's something Governor Ducey, quite frankly, has helped try to push forward. I think there is an opportunity, so it's something this group is going to want to know. How that relates to regulatory and authority, how that relates to forest health in this last bullet is the Forest Service is filled with dedicated, passionate, competent people. It is an entity that is also incredibly boxed in terms of how it views the landscape that surrounds our watershed. The Forest Service looks at landscape and timber resources that affect our watersheds in terms of what is the value of that, the monetary value of those timber resources. What we know is the real value in these landscapes in a ponderosa pine forest ecosystem is not the timber. It is the value of the restored acre that allows that landscape to function in a healthy way. It allows that landscape to manage and handle low intensity fire. It allows that landscape to be dispersed that doesn't engender catastrophic crown fire. Next slide, please. So the reality is, without forest, this is my personal take, without forest industries, vibrant and growing, pulling timber off this landscape, we are never going to move the needle significantly in terms of bringing our forest ponderosa pine ecosystem back to a place that handles high frequency, low intensity fire. We know over and over and over again, we are going to have to pay to keep our forests healthy and then to protect our watersheds. The question is do we pay in a preventative and a proactive way, or do we pay time and time again reactively? The Schultz fire, $135 million in economic impact. The museum fire, it is still going, not the fire, but the counting is still going, and it is going to be 10 and 20 times the cost of what that restoration would have been to recover a watershed that, Alan's on, that he can attest to, and many of us can attest to, are changed for decades and decades and decades to come, if not forever, given climate change. So being a really part of that effort to recognize low value timber is not an asset, it's a liability in this ecosystem. And our Forest Service principles and priorities, their rules, their chain of custody need to change to recognize that. A part of this conversation is just the cold, cruel reality that by one of the Forest Service's own initial phase 1 assessments, only 25% of the acres on 4-Fry had positive economic value. And that is a result of low value, small dimensional, biomass laden resources. This last one, it's unbelievable. Every acre on a typical average, 30 tons of negative value biomass of unhealthy forest comes off every acre, 30 tons. And we are talking about a $2.4 million a million acre project. It is astounding what fire suppression for 100 years, no timber industry has done. The economic reality is that we have to have industry as a partner. Next slide, please. So, what are those opportunities in local government? We have done, and I've been proud to play a small role. We are the only county with a forest restoration director. We are active and engaged with partners on forest work. I was on the board, the PAC that helps support and pass the Watershed Protection Project. We have to understand that these are not just natural resource issues, these are economic issues. We do not have enough money to time and time again come and bail us out from catastrophic crown fires that are impacting our watersheds and our communities. We have spent millions and will continue to spend millions on Bill Williams Mountain. They just reopened the mountain to some limited visitation. Go take a look at what a healthy steep slope section of restored Bill Williams Mountain hasn't been touched in 100 years. The keys to healthy watersheds are healthy forest ecosystems. That can only occur when you have broad-based community support that understands that clogged, small dimensional ponderosa pine forests, to some, not to me, but to some, they may be really beautiful to look at. They are an incredible liability to our watersheds, and they're an incredible liability to our public health and safety. So with that, I think that's the last slide, right?
Yep.
Yep. So I'm at 10 minutes, and so I'm going to pass it there. I do want to go back afterwards and suggest that you keep an eye on that rural water adequacy bill. I think there's some great opportunities for us to support that broad coalition of people who are going to move that next set of groundwater and watershed legislation forward.
Thank you, Art, and feel free to put your comments and questions in the chat box for Art, and he'll be looking there next. Miss Mawan Hen, you're up next.
All right. Hi, everybody. It is so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and names. So don't feel bad if you don't have your camera on, but it is wonderful to see you. My name is Moan Hen, and I'm the Executive Director at Willow Bend Environmental Education Center. So you can pass on to the next slide. Thank you. Willow Bend is a nonprofit organization in Coconino County. We're full-time year-round environmental education center. And a lot of what we do is actually providing watershed, water quality education, which I will talk about in a minute. I was also the program and then the executive director for Friends of Flagstaff's Future. So Michelle, good job on there. But I mentioned that because I did do some watershed related, both volunteer organizing around the Rio de Flag, as well as advocacy work. So I do have a background in conservation biology and outdoor recreation and tourism, and I got my master's right here at NAU. So a lot of it was related to our local environment. I also worked on a lot of projects for federal agencies and nonprofits. So I really love I worked all across the Western US, and I'm excited to be working here in Flagstaff for the last 12 years. But especially when we're talking about things like watersheds, I feel like sort of a broad set of experiences and knowledge base is really helpful. And I feel that has served me well. So go ahead, next slide. I think I'm mentioning sort of my experience with watershed issues again, because a lot of what I do has to do with education or motivating the public, the community to be engaged with watershed issues. And I feel that having that sort of broad experience is really helpful. I'm not going to get into all of that, but pretty much I've worked on a lot of different watershed protection plans and projects in the Southwest and during my time in the Pacific Northwest. And during my time with Friends of Flagstaff's Future, actually organized a lot of Rio de Flag cleanup days and projects. So I've kind of learned a lot about, what gets people motivated to come out? Why are they coming out? What is their sort of connection or feeling towards our, the watershed, and especially the Rio de Flag? I worked with the Friends of the Rio and a lot of these projects as partners. We did also a lot of invasive plant removal along the Rio. And I really kind of before this current situation, I've had the pleasure of taking or organizing tours that are sponsored by the city of Flagstaff to Picture Canyon as well as Francis Short Pond. And I mentioned that again because just kind of prompting the questions and things like that, good discussion. It's always really fascinating to sort of see what our community already knows, what are people learning when we go out there, when we have visitors to our community, what are the kind of things that interest them, what kind of questions come up. So I would really encourage, as we're sort of moving along here, if you have any questions about I feel like we have a really good pulse on the community. I think I did to this day probably at least 20 tours to Picture Canyon. And a big part of these tours is actually talking about the restoration. I see Alan Hayden's here as well. Great. A big part of, that sort of those tours, the educational part, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is the restoration of the Rio. And even the word restoration itself. We also lead field trips. And again, I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's a big part of what I do. So next slide. So speaking about education, now we are virtual, but before that, Willow Bend provides a lot of programs about the Rio, about watersheds, and about water conservation. We have a lot of events. We have an event, again, when we were in person, called Science Saturday, which every first Saturday of the month, the community was invited to experience a different topic, and watersheds, the Rio, hiking, things like that, protection of open space, and again, in sort of restoration of watersheds was a big one. And so there was a lot of sort of opportunities to interact with the community and to provide this educational events to the community about these special places. And I don't know if all of you know where Willow Bend is, but we're sort of situated right above Sinclair Wash. And so a lot of the events included sort of a hike down to Sinclair Wash. We have the Flagstaff Urban Trail System, a lot of field trips. So I differentiate field trips and guided tours, just for those of you who don't come from the education background. Field trips are for schools and classrooms or school groups, and guided tours are for the community. That's the only difference. But again, in a partnership with the city and actually the Flagstaff Unified School Districts, we provide field trips and guided tours to Francis Short Pond, talking about the pond, talking about its sort of role in the watershed. The Rio wetlands, which are just about a mile from Willow Bend, they're right under the I-40 overpass. And so we do a lot of water quality programs with students, talking about what is water quality, why it's important. And then again, Picture Canyon, talking about the extraordinary restoration of the Rio. And as I mentioned before, from third grade, we just talk about what restoration even means. And it's really fascinating to sort of introduce it at that early age and introduce those concepts and sort of receive feedback from young students, what it means to them, their thoughts about it, how they sort of see restoration and the importance of watersheds. So I feel really fortunate and privileged to be able to have sort of a pulse on how the community views our watershed. From usually it starts at around third grade is when we start taking students out to Picture Canyon, all the way to our community tours. And there, we had, I think our oldest hiker claimed to be 92. So anywhere from third grade to kids at heart. That's sort of where I have the advantage, I think, to kind of engage with. I can say that educational programs are key to restoration and to protection, to the policy level. So I've worked both in policy and education. We really see that connection. People, are engaged in what they have experience with, what they value, and I actually should say a positive experience with. And so really our goal at Willow Bend is to create that positive experience, that intimate experience with our watershed, with our open spaces, with our natural environment. So that's really when it comes to education. It's sort of we protect what we love, we protect what we know. And so through young children, then we sort of see adults as well. And I'll just share a really quick story. We did a tour to Picture Canyon. We did a field trip to Picture Canyon for third graders. And we asked, how many of you know about the Rio de Flag? And you might be surprised, or maybe not, if you do work in Flagstaff. We often think of Flagstaff like everybody goes outdoors and everybody gets to hike. And you'll be surprised that most of the schools we work with, students don't hike. They don't hike with their families. They don't know about the watershed. They don't know about the Rio. And so again, I feel very privileged that we have the opportunity to share that with them. But one of our the students very few put their hands up. And we shared that we have a free community tour that Saturday. Well, on that Saturday, one of the young students from our field trip that week came with her father, who's never been hiking before. They've never been outside, they've never been hiking. And so in those tours, we have an opportunity to sort of reach the parents and the families as well. So that's kind of what I have to say about education. I really encourage any questions about either specifics of education, what we do, what information we convey, or just ideas and suggestions. So we'll go into volunteer opportunities. Next slide. So volunteering opportunities, again, getting people out there to actively participate in restoration or taking care of the places that they love is really important. It's a big part of education. It's actually something that we call the 5-point or the STAR method, where you teach students, you engage the teacher, you take them out, but then you have some kind of engagement for the community or the parents. You have an opportunity for them to do something together. And so we try and provide that, whether it's cleanups or again, sort of Rio de Flag cleanups, invasive plant removal, etc. So I think volunteer opportunities are not just a feel good way, to get people outside, but they're actually on a higher level, really important to get people intimately and, on a deeper level engaged with their outdoors and their environment. So thank you.
Thank you, Mawan. Again, keep those questions and comments rolling. Appreciate that. Miss Maggie, please take it away.
Great, thank you. My name's Maggie Toomey, and I work for the City of Flagstaff Sustainability Program. I'm their volunteer and event coordinator, and my primary role is to host special events for sustainability and to manage the Community Stewards Program, which encompasses Adopt an Avenue, Adopt a Foots, and the Winter Snow Play Stewards. So although I work in sustainability, I don't actually hold a degree in environmental science. I hold a degree in recreation, parks, and leisure, and with a sports management focus. But I think that I'm the luckiest one on the sustainability team because I am surrounded by a plethora of people with a vast amount of knowledge on sustainability. And I learn something every day working with them, which is one of the best perks of my job. Well, I take that back. The best perk of my job is working with Albert, the sustainability squirrel. So as you see him with me in my picture, go ahead and advance that slide, Andy. So my history with watersheds goes back to my childhood. I grew up in Wisconsin and there was essentially a lake in my backyard. And so I grew up spending my days swimming and fishing and sailing and ice skating and catching frogs, and you name it, I did it. And here, fast forward 35 to 40 years later, and I find myself in a high desert ponderosa pine forest. And to many people in our community, you might say, well, what do you mean watershed? We live in the middle of a forest and a high desert. And that's kind of how I felt for a long time when I lived in Flagstaff. I was aware of Francis Short Pond and I was aware of Lake Mary, but I was not aware of the Rio de Flag. If you asked me about the Rio de Flag, I probably would have said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. So I got hired in 2016 for the sustainability program. And with that hiring, I was blessed to be able to work with an AmeriCorps Vista who also shared time working with the Friends of the Rio de Flag. And I think she's on the call tonight. Chelsea, it's good to see you. And Chelsea really opened my eyes to the watershed in our community. And she really helped me learn so much about it. Working in the city of Flagstaff, my first week on the job, I was thrown the special event to plan and coordinate Make a Difference Day. I had never been to a Make a Difference Day event before, and they told me it was at this place called the I-40 Wetlands. I had no idea where that was. Chelsea took me there and I fell in love immediately. And I'm proud to say that now it's on a regular bike route for me. I love riding my bike down there. So we held that Make a Difference Day event 2 months after I started, hosting 150 volunteers down at the I-40 wetlands. And we collected over 100 bags of trash. And we removed 9-yard dumpsters full of invasive weeds. And we cleared out a drainage. And I think the main thing that I learned from that special event was where the litter and the trash ends up. It ends up in the middle of the wetlands. Like we were in the cattails pulling out, pallets and mattresses and all kinds of debris. And here I thought that the 20 bags that I brought to fill would be enough. And I was so surprised. The other thing that I learned at that event were how many organizations and people in this community care about our wetlands and our watershed. People from Natural Channel Design and USGS and ACE and AZCC and the Sierra Club and City of Flagstaff Stormwater and Open Space just have a plethora of people in our community that really care about the watershed. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about litter in Flagstaff. This is kind of what I specialize in my work and have done a lot of research about litter in our community. The first thing that we should pay attention to are our curbside bins and our dumpsters. It's a really delicate process to tip a dumpster or a curbside bin. Sounds strange, but it really is. That timing is everything. Because in the windy climate that we live in, that debris, if it's not tipped correctly, can end up all over your street. I'm sure some of you have come home after work on recycling day and found your recycling bin tipped over in the street. It might not be the fault of the trash truck. It might be that windy condition. Flagstaff's also the gateway to the Grand Canyon. We see over 5 million visitors annually, and so many of them are from other cultures and other countries that treat waste disposal much differently than we do. So we need to make sure that our signage and our communication with our visitors is clear and global and accessible. Flagstaff's also a growing community. We are almost at 100,000 people if you count the population at NAU and some of the surrounding communities that might not be within Flagstaff city limits, but use Flagstaff as their hometown. We're growing, and that impacts the level of litter in our community profusely. Illegal dumping. Illegal dumping is something that first Make a Difference Day, I learned a lot about. Illegal dumping happens in our watersheds. It happens in ravines and washes and along the Rio de Flag. So the city works really hard to provide opportunities for citizens to appropriately dispose of waste that they might have. We have bulky pickup that's free. Most communities don't have a free bulky pickup with their trash collection. We have drop-off days that help process hazardous waste in our community. We also are home, a popular snow play destination. As you'll see, the bottom picture of my slide there shows one of our popular snow play areas, and it's just littered with sled waste. We have the winter snow play stewards that actively go out and clean up after our winter snow play participants. And you might be thinking immediately, like, why would we enable that behavior by cleaning up after them? And the research shows time and time again that a litter-filled area fosters more littering. And when the area is clean, it fosters clean litter behavior. So that's why we do it. It's the first step in behavior change, and we hope that we can make some headway there. Next slide, please. The map on the left is a map of the drainage fields in our community that make up the Rio de Flag watershed. The map on the right is a map of the Adopt a Foots and Adopt an Avenue programs, which are litter cleanup programs where people can adopt a section of either avenue or urban trail and clean it up several times a year to help manage litter in our community. Now, if I were more tech savvy, I would have made it so that you could, overlay them. And I should have just asked Lisa, because I bet she could have done it. So if we were to overlay that map on the right onto the map on the left, it would show that so much of our avenues and our foots go along our watershed drainages, our washes where they dump into the Rio. And if you can see on the map on the left, the Rio de Flag is in the blue areas primarily. And then the washes are in the other colored areas. So we are working really hard to make sure that we keep the debris out of those wash areas. Next slide, please. So engaging volunteers is something else I do a lot of. And one of the things that I've learned, especially within the last year, is that it's easy to get a volunteer to come to an event one time. It's a whole different story to get a commitment from a volunteer to be active in a long-term basis. And here's a good recipe for you. Identify your needs as an organization and make those very clear, and make sure that you are communicating those to your volunteers so that they know what's expected of them and what your goals are. Second, and I think this one gets overlooked a lot, make sure that you understand the needs and the goals of your volunteers. Why are they there? They might not really care that much about the watershed. They might be there because they love birds and they want to be down in the I-40 wetlands, and what a great opportunity to meet people. So find out why they're there and embrace that, and maybe cherish that in the sense that you find out that volunteer is a birder. Ask them to lead a bird walk along the Rio. help engage them to help celebrate your cause. And then we need to create a variety of opportunities for different abilities and different needs. Currently, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so it makes volunteering on some levels really challenging. And the lesson that I've learned along the way is that we need to ask our volunteers how they can volunteer, what can we do for them to make it comfortable for them to volunteer. And that looks different for everyone. It's standard practice for all of us, I'm sure, to follow the CDC guidelines and then to follow our organization's protocols when it comes to COVID-19. But it's really critical to ask those volunteers what feels good to them and what would make them comfortable coming out to volunteer to support your cause. And then, of course, appreciation. Everybody appreciates appreciation. It doesn't have to be a big gesture, and it can be very simple. Next slide. So there are so many ways to celebrate the Rio de Flag watershed, and the sustainability program offers many of those through our Make a Difference Day, through our stream team, stormwater litter cleanup events, drop-off days, Earth Day cleanups. You can adopt a section of Foots or Avenue, which we talked a little bit about. Here's a novel idea. Adopt the storm drain in your neighborhood. It's not a formal program, but you can do it. When the trash truck comes by, check your gutters to make sure they're clear. Adopt that storm drain. We have winter snow play stewards. And if you don't do this next one, I think I'm going to, because I think we need a full moon bike ride along the Rio de Flag. What a better way to celebrate our dark skies in Flagstaff and our watershed all in one evening. So whatever it is that you do to help celebrate our watershed, make sure that you should bring a friend along. They could be like me and lived in Flagstaff for 10 years before they found the I-40 wetlands. You know, expand someone's horizon and share your passion. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you to all the speakers. If you haven't had a chance to ask questions,